Now that we have completed the vertical alignment design, the next step is to create our sections assembly. The assembly is essentially a cross-sectional view of the structural elements we intend to define for the road. The elements include lanes, shoulders, curbs, side slope, and pavement depths. The assembly will be applied to the alignment to define a three-dimensional corridor for the road. In Civil 3D, the assembly also enables us to define the superelevation for the horizontal alignment. Now, to design or create our assembly, we'll use the assembly buttons. We'll click on Create Assembly, and we have this dialog box where we can name our assembly and give a description. I'll name this assembly and click on OK. Notice on your prompt, it says we should specify assembly baseline location. That's essentially asking for the location where you would like to place your assembly. I'd place it here. Now, the next step would be to add structures. And to do that, we would use the properties and the palette button up here on the top left of your screen. Ensure that the two palettes and the properties are on. And so they are on my screen. I'll then proceed to add elements of the subassembly. When I click on the two palettes button, let's introduce our lanes by going to the Lanes tab and using the first option here, Lane Superelevation AOR. When I click on that, I can click on the right and on the left of this crosshair to add my right and left lanes respectively. The next step then is to add shoulders for my lane. That I'll do by clicking on Basic. Notice that there's a shoulder option here, but we will be using the basic one. And so click on Basic Shoulder, and then you can add shoulders to your width. Now notice how I zoom out to place my shoulder, because I intend for the shoulder should align with the top surface of your lane structure. And so I'll click to add my pavement on the right, and I'll do the same here on the left. Now, for the design we are doing in this tutorial, and perhaps in your project, using this configuration is sufficient. That is your lanes and shoulders. The other element we would add here is called daylight. It is known as daylight, or it's essentially the side slope. It is a slope that allows an interaction between the existing surface and the top of your road structure. And so we would be using the daylight multi-intercept slope or side slope for this design. Would click on that, and we would add our slopes. Now notice that the text sizes are a bit huge. This sometimes is a function of the scale we are working with, but that can be edited later on. Now we have a complete assembly structure for our roads. The next step to take would be to look at the properties of these elements and be sure that they meet our specification. Of particular interest here for us is the superelevation on the lanes. And so, like I said, we would click on the properties tab, And when we click on an object here, we're looking at the left lane. We can click on the properties and notice that your left lane or the properties of your left lane become visible. And so specifically, we are looking at introducing super elevation. For this, we are going to be using, since we are working with the left lane, we will use the left lane outside super elevation. Once that is set, you can check the other properties of your road or of your lane. You can see the lane width, you can see the default slope, the depths of the pavements, and other properties. We are satisfied with that. We can then go on to escape that command and go to the right pavement. Sorry, the right lane. In the same fashion, we would use here, we'll set the super elevation to right lane outside. Now we have successfully added super elevation to our lane. We now have a sub-assembly that can be applied to our alignments. The next step we will take here is to apply this super elevation we have defined to our alignment. And to do that, notice that we have the tool space palette open here. On this tool space palette, go to the Prospector tab. On the Prospector tab, we can click on the alignments and see centerline alignments. If you click on that, your alignment becomes visible, the one we created previously. Essentially, this alignment becomes visible, and that's HA. Now we right click it to edit our super elevation, and that is done by clicking on calculate super elevation. Here then you can define the details of your road again, the road type, the lanes, the characteristics of your lane. For instance, you can see that the default here is 6 meters, whereas we are designing for 3.6 meters. You can then click on next to see your shoulder controls. And then here we can choose what the maximum super elevation we will be working with. In this case, some tables are defined already in Civil 3D, and we will work with the 6% super elevation. Remember that for highways that can be higher or less if it's not a highway. It all depends on the type of road you are designing. The maximum super elevation will be dependent on the nature of the road you are designing. But for this tutorial, we will choose 6, and you can apply an automatic resolve of overlaps, assuming there are portions of your work of your curves where there are overlaps. Remember that super elevation is applied to your horizontal curves. So we are going to take a look at this once we have clicked finish. When you click finish, the super elevation is calculated for the horizontal curves. Now notice that the markers for super elevation has been introduced, with 6 being the maximum super elevation as you approach the curve. Now that is done, we would attempt to apply this to recalculate this super elevation. And the need for this is if this has not been applied to all your curves, or there are characteristics you want to change, then such as the design speed. Now this is the place where you can do that. Usually you would click on the super elevation wizard and apply this to your entire alignment. So, and we go through this again, and once we finish, again, so we have completed the super elevation option. Notice now that both curves have been successfully, or super elevation has been calculated for both curves. Now this concludes this video where we have created our assembly and applied it successfully, or applied the super elevation features successfully to our alignment. In the next video, we are going to be looking at creating a corridor. Thank you very much.